Welcome to SessionWell. My name is Adam Luke. I am an associate marriage and family therapist. I currently work full-time in substance abuse and alcohol addiction.
And I'm Judy, also an associate marriage and family therapist. I work in private practice with Renovora Counseling in Brea.
So what is SessionWell? Why do you want to listen to us? So SessionWell is a place that we created. It's a community for pre-licensed clinicians, trainees, licensed clinicians, and the average Joe. When Judy and I first started out, we met in a private practice. We were very green associates, very new to stepping out on our own, and we realized there wasn't a community or a place that really fostered discussion and really brought home the interventions we use as therapists, but also the needs we have to have met as people, right? And so that's why we exist here on the SessionWell podcast.
Yes, and always thank you to my brother with Kira Studios for doing all of our marketing. So if you're ever in need of a website or promo video or client lead generations, he is the guy to contact.
Fred Yin, man, he is a boss. All right, so what are we talking about this week? What we're going to talk about this week was I was searching on my phone the other day, and out popped this article on BuzzFeed, and the article is 7 fears I had about therapy that never came true. This is going to be listed down underneath this video so you can read the article and sort of follow along and maybe even think that we didn't nail it correctly. Mm-hmm. We'll find out. So it is a very common thing that Judy and I hear.
Yes.
And we hear it normally through that the tone and the way that the communication happens over the phone when someone calls, right? Mm-hmm. When someone's searching for therapy, you can tell a lot on where that person is in their thought process. And so we want to break down some of those fears. The fact is, therapy still has a stigma. We're trying to break this, that somehow if you need therapy, you are too broken or you're not able to carry your own weight. Whatever negative cognition you would like to throw in, it exists. The truth is, probably in our American society, we need more spaces where we can be ourselves and decompress. If you look through this from a cultural side, there's been cultures all over time and place on this planet that have created spaces for people to exist. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it is our stress and our normal surroundings that prohibit us from doing that nowadays. Yes. So we're going to dig into some of the fears that were brought up in this article, and also, again, some of the fears that we've run across.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. Were you afraid to start therapy? Well, how old were you when you first started your first session?
So the first session, I was 11 years old.
Okay.
I was
self-referred, or is it?
Self-referred via parent.
Right, at 11.
At 11. So, and I did therapy 11 to 13. Okay. And it wasn't always consistent. You know, my family had things where it was very much, if fiscally we could do it, I was in therapy. Sometimes we didn't have the money, so we didn't do it. Yeah. I sort of had this benefit of when I was growing up, I wouldn't say I was socially awkward, but I was always the chubby kid. So I had this, like I very much sat on the outside of the social fringe of everyone I went to school with. Mm-hmm. So I didn't have a ton of close friends. And so therapy for me was just the need to like cathartically release everything that I would normally be able to talk to with best friends and with kids, but I was the only child, and the neighborhood I was in didn't have a ton of kids, and we were all on different schedules. So for me, being able to talk to a therapist, I was able to actually, put my internal thoughts to external interventions, basically. I will say the scariest part for going back to therapy was when I was an adult. I went back when I was 26. And again, it was a blessing because I had a family member that basically sought me out and was like, I could tell you really need to go to therapy. And there was definitely a moment in that I was like, I was very frustrated. Uh-huh. But at the same time, I was like, this is an ultimate blessing. This person's willing to invest in me. I'm going to go ahead and take them for all they're worth.
Right.
Like, okay, we're going to do it. And it ended up being something I very much needed. And I'm telling you that not as a therapist, telling you that as a person. Mm-hmm. I can tell you my therapy drastically increased in where I was able to meet other people when I was in my own therapy. Same. And again, processing what I was needing. What really breaks my heart is when I'm reading off of a place like BuzzFeed these fears that people have, and they are to be validated and they are real life, but they should not prohibit you from being your best self. But we're very much in this dog eat dog world, it feels like, and I think that's where these fears come out, because well, if I let someone know that I need a little help, then obviously I'm not this badass, right?
Or something's like really wrong with me.
Yeah, obviously I'm too broken to be successful,
Yeah.
be a good parent, be a mom, dad, whatever it is. It's a complete lie.
Right.
Like, just for and foremost, it's a lie. And it's interesting because with my clients, when I was in private practice, I was working with older adults. It's interesting to hear them speak their truths now of realizing like, hey, that person that I always thought was the it and didn't need help and didn't do therapy, you know, maybe they have cirrhosis of the liver, you know, so they self-medicated. Maybe they're no longer here because they took their lives. Maybe they're extremely unhealthy. Like, you know, maybe they didn't live that fulfilled life because, again, they self-medicated through something else when they could have done therapy.
Right.
And so why did, I base my life off this person who had unhealthy habits that essentially took them out? And I think that's a pretty interesting thing because in my spread of private practice, I either had developing males, so I would say adolescents, or even, up to 30-year-olds. I count myself as someone who's still developing. And then I had this break where my next set of clients was like 50 on up. And it was interesting to hear sort of that self-reflection from them of realizing like, oh crap, the guy I modeled my life after wasn't actually a healthy person or had these, quote unquote dark secrets. Where I think therapy gives you that ability to actually process this.
Right. I'll admit, like I had lots of fears going to therapy. I was that, person that thought I didn't need it. I can help everybody else with their problems, not my own. And so I didn't go into therapy until I was in the MFT program. So I don't know, how old was I? Like maybe like 29, almost 30. And just never thought about even going to my own therapy, even though I wanted to be a therapist. Yeah. And it's just in Asian culture in general, like it's just not a thing. Like it's gotten a lot better, and I love serving the Asian community and like just by culture identity stuff. But like we were kind of taught, if you have issues or problems or feelings, you just stuff them and you don't talk about it. You just put on a happy face and you do your work and you're fine, and emotions don't really matter. Or they matter, but you work it out on your own. Like, why would you go and pay somebody to hear all your thoughts and feelings and blah, blah, blah. So, which we'll talk about in our list. But there's a lot of reasons why people hesitate to come into therapy. Even my husband, like him being an adult male, like, when we first met too, like he was very much, it's not that he didn't support what we do, but he was hesitant to like go to couples and premarital, because he was like, why are we going to ask somebody else's opinion and have them speak into our marriage and our relationship? Yeah. And so there's just so many different reasons why, and I think that it continues to be a thing. And so we're just going to talk about some of the common fears that people have. And if there's more that you guys know, feel free to jump in and let us know. Yeah, please feel free to comment. We drastically, we engage with the comment that you have, and we build that into what the next podcasts are going to be. So we definitely appreciate anything you bring to the table. Number one on this BuzzFeed article was, I don't think a therapist could tell me anything I don't already know about myself, which is hysterical because that's what you were essentially talking about. But again, I think sometimes that's one of our first defense mechanisms. I appreciate where your husband came from on that thought process of, why do I want someone else to speak into our lives? I think that's another misconception of therapy, is that your therapist is going to dictate to you what to do. Right. How many of us have I think women more than men, but we buy something to wear, new shirt, pants, whatever, and then we ask someone else, what do you think about it? It doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to get rid of the shirt, I'm going to return it or whatnot, but do I look good? Oh no, you would do a different color, blah blah blah, whatever it is. Therapy in many ways, shapes and forms the same thing emotionally. You're again able to externalize that internal conversation bit, and you'll never realize how cathartic it is to actually say those things in your head out loud
sometimes you answer your own questions, or you can really feel that internal pull in yourself. What decision should I make? You say it out loud and you go, okay, well, I kind of know for myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a big takeaway, that therapy is not someone else coming in and fixing your life.
No.
I don't think I would ever describe it that way, nor could I tell you that's how I ever felt it. It's literally, I'm sharing, I'm taking the time to be deliberate in sharing these internal conflicts outside of myself so that I can process them.
Mm-hmm. And so many clients always ask, what's your advice for us? Or tell me your thoughts. I've had a lot of clients literally be like, okay, now I want to hear you talk more than I talk. And normally, I can kind of flip it and say, what does that mean for you? How come that's important to you that I speak and not you speak? And I think that, to me, I feel like therapy is more of a mirror. I feel like it's us reflecting back to you what you already know. All the strengths, all the interventions, all the hope, like all the stuff, you guys already possess them. And I don't think that therapists, it is our job to tell you how to lead your life or to tell you what's like, quote unquote, like what's wrong with you. It's more just being the safe space, the person that's going to journey with you in your own personal journey of like self-awareness, and all those different things.
Absolutely. The way that I've looked at it, and if you've ever worked with me, I always call it, I'm your emotional guardrails, basically. Mm-hmm. Like, you tell me where you want to go. This is a destination you want. Then I'm going to keep you, to the best of my ability, on track of processing that. But I'm not going to tell you, hey, I'm going to drive the car. This is where we're going. And that's a big fear of, especially like, oh, well, how much do I want this person in my life? One of the biggest takeaways I ever got from one of my own supervisors, who's actually, helping develop me as a trainee, as a beginning clinician, was we're not detectives. Mm-hmm. So every question your therapist should ask is not for your therapist's own need. And so I sort of scale myself on that of like, if I'm going to ask a person, is this for the client's benefit or is it for my benefit? And if it's for my benefit, then this isn't the time nor the place. Yeah. Because it is their space, mm-hmm. right? So I wanted to jump on to the next one that I think we're sort of talking about. I loved it. I picture my therapist taking furious notes while I laid on the couch sobbing. Because it's so much the truth. We think that, it's hysterical. A lot of cartoons have nailed it down that therapists are some emotional, less person, mm-hmm. devoid person who's just sitting there going, while you share.
Right.
I will tell you, I've sat with some therapists like that in my own personal therapy. That wasn't for me. I moved on. But I know certain people that they absolutely love to see their therapist taking notes on them. Mm-hmm. I personally don't take notes.
I don't take notes either. I have a notepad next to me, but it's more for like medication or dosage or things that I like kind of need to go back to. But I've never sat there and taken notes furiously, except for maybe an intake session, which is the first session. And we'll kind of talk about in another podcast like what to expect from your first session in therapy. But for me, just as a personal person, I can't focus with a client and be present and also be taking notes. Not saying that therapists that take notes cannot do that. Means they're just talented.
Yeah.
But that's something that I've never done, and I don't think Adam does either.
I don't. But again, everyone's got their own style. Yeah. But I think everyone's been sort of conditioned to that movie therapist that just sort of sits behind you or angled off. So that's not necessarily how it is. And so also bringing in this next dynamic is, because it fits in here at this moment, is I didn't feel like my problems were real enough to benefit from therapy. So sometimes we feel like I don't even think I can actually share this with a therapist because the therapist is going to laugh me out of the building. There's two folds in that. The way that this is presented, first of all, we sort of we're diminishing the effects that our problems are having on us, and we're then undervaluing ourselves. We're not bringing our own value to the discussion. The fact is, I would say that pretty much 99% of this world at this moment could benefit from one therapy session. Yeah. I don't care if you're a millionaire with no problems. I don't care if you're a trust fund baby. I don't care if you love your husband and love your kids, or if you're a husband that loves what he does and loves his wife. Whatever it is, you probably could benefit from therapy because we all have problems that we go and wonder about that. We all have anxiety.
Yes, we all have childhood wounds. We all have relational conflict. We all have work stress-ish.
I mean, pretty much all of life regardless if you had a good upbringing or a bad upbringing, no one gets out of this world without a scar.
Absolutely.
Right? And again, sometimes scars exist not because anyone was in the wrong. Accidents happen.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same way with our psyche and same way when we approach therapy. But I do want to validate that yes, there is a fear behind becoming vulnerable, because a lot of times when we're growing up, we're not taught to be vulnerable. Remember, like, issues of our house stay in our house. I've heard that a lot. I've seen it lived many different ways. And so we're taught to compartmentalize.
Yep.
And therapy is a lot like freeing up space. We're throwing away things that are no longer ours to keep. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that what you're saying about, I just lost my train of thought.
No problem.
It was, what were you saying?
So I was talking about vulnerability.
Yes. Okay. So therapy and stuff. So the cartoon, sorry. Coming back. So yes, like I think in movies or in cartoons or just drawings, it's always the therapist like behind the client, not face to face. I just wanted to clarify that. I think that in therapy, it's very relational. Granted, it is the client sharing a lot more of their information than us to them, but it's just being in a space together with another human being that I think can be very powerful. And I get this a lot of times from clients of them comparing their like problems or their struggles with other people that they don't know and say, I know my problems aren't as significant or as big as other people's. And I think everyone has their own reason for wanting to say that specific phrase. But something as, I don't know, like whether it's loneliness or just, I just want to talk about myself for an hour, or it's just a form of self-care. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to have this, what you perceive to be as this huge traumatic event in order to come to therapy. I think if you're feeling any discomfort, emotionally, physically, whatever, I think that's great. I think therapy is beneficial for all people. Like what would it hurt? Unless you had a bad therapist, that's another story. But in general, just, like don't minimize your discomfort and have that be a fear of coming into therapy.
Yeah, I mean, comparison is always going to be something we're going to struggle with, but I think it's important that you bring up the fact that we like to compare other people's lives to our own and then say, yes, they have the bigger problems. Largely because if I accepted the narrative that my life has work to be done, then I have to do work. And that's not something that a lot of us want to sit with. And don't hear me say this as if I'm up on some high horse. My life is the same. I do this even as a therapist. It's funny, I can sit with you and I can put my clinical hard hat on and we can go through your life, and then I can hop in my car and be driving home and become emotionally enraged at stupid drivers on the road.
Yeah.
So I'm not, completely immune to this world. I very much experience the same thing. That's also something to really understand with your therapist. The therapist you're sitting with is not a robot.
No.
They have challenges in their own lives, but like what Judy says, it's not our space to share that with you, our client. But I think that's another dynamic of really having good therapists, is therapists that can realize within the right context, I can really, I can empathize with you because I've been in that spot, or maybe I don't know that exact pain. Man, I can sit here and I hurt with you.
Right.
And so how many times do we allow that to happen in our real life? That it wasn't in this BuzzFeed article, but something that I've heard from other individuals who have called for phone consultations before is, well, I have a really good friends group, so I don't know if I really need therapy. And while that can be a total blessing to have a support groups are not unbiased, right? And so sometimes it's really hard to bring truly information you need an objective opinion on, because your friend is always going to try to either save the relationship or justify their position in the relationship, or even your family, right? Our families, we can have amazing families, but our families are always going to be centered on the family needs, right? And the hierarchy. It's not necessarily a bad thing in its own self, but they can influence your decision. Judy and I were clinically raised up in the MFT field of understanding relational and systemic perspectives of life. And so what we know is that if I work with an individual and an individual changes, they're going to force their system to change. largely what you have happen is the system tries to force the individual back into whatever negative life choices, experiences, behaviors they were experiencing, because the system then has to change around that.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I'm not saying don't trust your family, love your family, take the information that is good and healthy to heart, the stuff that's not, leave to them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's understanding that a therapist is truly objective. I love this because I start this off on all of my first sessions. I say the best thing about having me as your therapist is I truly do not have a vested interest in what you do with your life.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes people don't like to hear it say it that way. Well,
Right.
what do you mean you don't care for me? No, you heard that wrong. I'm just saying, for me, I am not going to drive your ship.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say to you ever, this is what I think you should do. Because my life is not your life. My wife, my house, everything else that I'm living through right now, I have my own subjective worries. My system is not your system.
Mm-hmm.
So
And it'll never, our systems won't mesh together.
Never mesh. I don't care, and this even goes culturally. I don't care if I'm dealing with another white male or you're dealing with another Asian female. It's not going to be the same, ever. Our dynamics are different.
And it's why people are always saying to therapists, therapists and clients people will ask, well, what is the point of going to a therapist if I already have really good friends? And it's a completely different relationship, and it is different because I'm outside. I don't know your history. I didn't do history with you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also not in your inner circle. I don't, like I'm not doing the day to day. Our friendship doesn't change because our therapeutic alliance is just different than a friendship. It's why we also can't do therapy with our friends. Like as MFTs, I sometimes get tempted or I get pulled into doing therapy with friends? Of course, but then being a friend and being a therapist is completely two different things, in my personal opinion.
Absolutely. I mean, triangulation, I think for the professionals that are listening to this podcast right now, you all have experienced that. Especially
like in a marriage, when you have your couple
goodness.
friends that are fighting and they're like, help fix us because you're a therapist.
I appreciate you bringing that up because that's what I was going to lead off with as well. No, you're all good. And the fact that, I've had my guy friends call me up. What would you do in this situation? And I just, from the straight beginning, say, it's an unfair position to put you in or me in.
Yeah.
Because we don't have the same wives. We don't have the same...
And you know their wives personally.
And I don't want to get into that fight. Never works out for us.
Right.
But then again, average Joe listening, this is also something that this happens to them as well. Especially if you're a feelings person, it's pretty funny when you may not have an MFT degree, you might not be a doctorate in psychology, whatever, but you will still have people who realize that you're an empath, so they will call you to solve my problems. Now, a lot of times we want to serve others, we want to be the helpful people person, but maybe it is actually better for us to sit back and be like, I don't want to join in this fight, because I always look at things as the fact that we do not have infinite energy in our day-to-day. Our jobs are stressful, our lives are stressful, our marriages or our relationships are stressful sometimes. And so, am I going to spend my energy and my time trying to fix someone else, no matter how much I truly love and support this person? It's a losing argument from the beginning. So sometimes it's like, hey, best thing is therapy. Or, hey, I read a good book, try this one out.
Yes.
And it's not me trying to dodge the question. It's not fair to either one of us.
Right.
And it's going to forever change our friendship. Because I have not heard too many successful friendships that once you take on this therapy, this empath, the spiritual guru, whatever it is, that the relationships stay mutually beneficial. Normally, you're going to end up crossing a line where they didn't like what you said, and now they don't talk to you anymore.
Right.
And this highlights why therapy is beneficial and why fears about therapy should go away. The best thing is, if you sit down with your therapist and your therapist says something that you seriously do not enjoy, first of all, I want you to scan it, make sure it's it's not my own defense mechanisms. But if you have a therapist that you're like, dude, I feel like every time I sit down with you, it's a fight, I don't feel like I'm growing, fire us.
Yeah.
I beg you, fire your therapist. if it's not working out for you. And that's a beautiful part of it, because you can't fire
your
friends.
or family.
Exactly.
Right.
But you know what? If you're just like, wow, this is just confrontational, it's not feeling like I'm working to something beneficial, fire it, move on, get a different therapist.
And we're going to also do a whole podcast on, like, you know, what makes a bad therapist, or, you know, and be able to check your own feelings on that too. But yeah, it's a different space. So don't be, I think that fear of having this like random person is, I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily, it makes sense, but just know that the space is for you.
So the final one that I want to talk about from the BuzzFeed one is, I thought it was too late to heal. That one, man, when I read that off this article,
that one's not as common.
I was like, oh, that's a that resonated within me, right? Because I think a lot of times we think of it as, well, that was 6-year-old me, that was 8-year-old me, that was 13-year-old me, or heck, I know Judy and I laugh about it now. We'll be like, well, that was back in college, or that was back in high school.
That was middle school. It was so sad.
But we do not look at it from the perspective of, inside all of us, we still carry around our inner child.
Oh, absolutely.
And our inner child, those stressors of high school, junior high, middle school, all that, are still real and relevant and just as much present.
And they get triggered when you don't expect it, or even when you know it's happening.
You know, for me, I was a bullied kid, so you can ask my wife, to this day, I struggle when I see a kid being bullied or treated like crap in public. Oh man, I gotta like start checking myself, soothing sides, because so much of, you know, what would be an unhealthy perspective was me trying to solve this kid's problem and get rid of my problems, and that's not how this works. But it's definitely a trigger that I have to be aware of, you know. And so this is something that again, we're dealing with as adults, but we try to suppress it and say, oh no, I didn't have, you know, that was a long time ago, that can't possibly be present in my life. Especially, I mean, think of ourselves as teenagers. We probably didn't have the best romantic relationships either. So I know that people still, like, if you were cheated on as in high school, or you had a very...
Or your parents got divorced.
Divorced, or you had a very damaging, you know, breakup or something like that. People who are now 30 or 40 or 50 are still relationally connecting and disengaging based on their teenage selves.
And we're constantly growing. I mean, like, where it's never too far to be healed. But I think that we're always constantly a healing vessel. I think we're always working, and just even little things. It doesn't have to be this huge traumatic thing, but things that from your childhood still come up to this day. Whether it's like, I used to know someone that in his family, like, they always had a fight for, like, it basically was like, you know, a free-for-all, like, first come, first serve. And so it was all this food, and he had, like, a lot of siblings. And so if they didn't get to the food first, then they would lose out on their quantity. So as an adult, he's really protective of his food. And in his marriage, you know, so it's not like it needs to be this dramatic thing, like a divorce of parents, but a lot of our childhood stuff comes into our adult self. And even if it was awful, or if it was not even that bad, it's never too late for healing.
Oh, absolutely. And if you want to get to like the couple sides of things, I've always, when I've worked with couples, I always, one of the interventions that I use is, let's introduce our inner children to each other. Let's have a play date. And a lot of times, you know, especially...
That's really vulnerable.
Very vulnerable, and especially the males always look at me weird, like, dude, this guy's straight up bro code. But it's like, no, let's see if our inner children can play together. Because I'm telling you, the relationships that last the longest are the ones that their inner children are playing with each other. And you're meeting each other's needs. So I appreciate how you said that's vulnerable. Sometimes I can overlook that in the systemic side of like boom, 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 boom. But it's the truth, you know. We've got to meet those needs of our inner children. And so if you know that, you know, the inner child of your wife or your husband was hurt in this way, you know, you have to be cognizant of it, and again, see, am I going to meet the needs? Am I going to be abusive? And we have to really look at it, because if you're being abusive, you have zero grounds or foundation to say that my actions are right, if you know it's something that hurts so bad.
And how many little kids, you know, need a hug when they're in distress? How many adults still need that same nurturing, whether it's an actual hug or just, sitting next to you, but we still need nurturing. So even though we're adults, we're still constantly in this process of healing. And they can also be stuff from current present time and not just like, oh, I've had all this other stuff that needs to be healed and I'm just too broken. But it's like, no, like we can address all of those different things.
I appreciate how you brought that up, because I was thinking it was probably like 4 weeks ago. Life hits all of us, right? And I was very frustrated. I was emotionally upset, and I remember my wife walking up and giving me a hug. And in that moment, I was still a pissy little brat because I was my inner child. And I was like, I don't want a hug. And it it's funny because I swear there's like a therapy voice in my head and then regular me.
All the time.
And it was like, oh, defense mechanism. And it was like, yeah, why don't I want the hug? It wasn't because what my wife was doing wasn't actually what I needed. It was because if I actually embraced it, I was going to let go of my frustration.
Yeah.
And it's funny how I wanted to stay on to my pissy self and go like, no,
safer.
Life is rough. And you need to take a knee in the moment.
Yeah. And there's tons of fears. Based off of my thing I want to talk about, let's see. I think also, this was probably my biggest fear going in, is the fear of confronting the actual issue. Like, what is the shit that I need to work on? It's like, I can sit here and be like, oh, I'm so secure in my insecurities, or like, oh, I'm so all about self-awareness. But sometimes I'm kind of scared. You know what I mean? Like, I'm kind of scared what mirror you're going to put back on me that's going to reflect back to me this issue that I really need to work on. Like, I've been in individual therapy for a few years, and I remember first going into my first couples, my premarital, and I was bringing my husband into this space where I know how to do individual, like as a client, like I can do that all day, like I can be a client, sure. But to like do couples, I was almost really afraid that having him in the room, that my therapist was going to see another ugly part of me that I hadn't already presented, and that the conflicts or the struggles that my husband and I have, like in our future marriage or in our current, but all that kind of stuff, like it was gonna, like I was gonna have to confront it.
Yeah.
Even, you know what I mean? Even though I like fill my head, oh, I'm a therapist, I'm all about, progress and blah, 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 blah. But it was almost kind of like I didn't really want that part of me to be laid out and have two other people in the room be able to recognize that and speak to it and have me actually work on it.
So I love the point you bring up, because I can completely agree with it, is the fact that I already knew the problem. And so I was like, okay, I identified the problem. How can I keep this away from this individual for as long as I possibly can? Like, let's throw out some flares here. I hated this, I hated that, and this person was a dick in my life, and blah, blah, blah. All while I'm trying to shell game my real emotions. And more people do this in therapy, and it's sometimes we do it being cognizant of it, and sometimes we do it subconscious, but we do try to, I'm going to go to therapy, but I don't actually want to have my therapy need net.
Or actually work.
Yeah, because if I did, then again, oh no, this is going to be too much. I remember, so again, first time in therapy 11 through 13, and then when I went back when I was 26, and I remember when I went back as 26, so to give more context, I had graduated with my MA in Marriage and Family Therapy. I was working as an associate. I think I had 2 years under my belt as working as a clinician. And I remember going in and sitting with this individual, and the first session with them was like a karate match. And not because they're a bad therapist. I personally think he's the best therapist in the world, but that's because he's my therapist. But I was that resistant.
Yeah.
Because here was my danger as a professional in the field. I could identify where he was trying to take me, and I was resistant to where he was taking me because I knew it was going to be positive for this therapy. There was no way I was going to be able to hold him back. And I remember the second session with him, he just sort of spiked me real hard. He could tell the way he was is he said, the first session, if you don't enjoy it, we don't ever have to do it. I don't charge you anything, right? So after the first session, he was like, so, are we going to continue again? I was like, we'll continue. But I was like, And he didn't, it's awesome because he's a very psychodynamic therapist, and he didn't go any further, and he went, okay, I'll see you next week. The next week, he just very kindly, smoothly, just totally, he knew the pressure point, right? Just boop. And I just immediately went to sobbing, right? 26-year-old male, MFT, I'm supposed to be all together, and I just completely broke apart. And I remember the anger, the frustration, and all the overwhelming emotions in that moment, and how I still couldn't contain them through the sobbing, because I was just, I always say tears are beautiful because they're washing away the pain. Mm-hmm. And I just felt it, right? Mm-hmm. I was ugly crying. I felt like I was just such a prima donna, but that's probably the male in me speaking, right? And so I'll tell you, that session was what locked me into going, I am going to devote myself to my own therapy. And it was not a moment I wanted to take voluntarily, but I'm telling you, you will have your breakthrough moment when you realize, like, oh, holy shit, I'm never going back. I'm never going to do this. Let's just contain it and muster it. And no, you have it. Once you've hit it and you've had your aha moment in therapy, you realize really how foolish you were for not utilizing it.
And therapy takes a lot of work. Like, you know, we're not going to lie about that. It's not really work on our part as the therapist. It is really more work on the client. And I kind of was like Adam too, like just self-disclosing in general, is the fact that I remember I just had a really bad dating history in my 20s. Never really like picked a good one, I guess. And at the end of the day, I had to check myself, okay, what is the common denominator in all of this? Oh, it's me. Shit. And so it was like, okay, and you know, I was in an MFT program and I was looking at systems and relationships, and I was like, okay, I should probably go to therapy. Even though I kept trying to minimize this like shitty history of men. But I was scared because I didn't want to confront the issue, because what if the issue is me? Which usually it is, but it's like, what version, you know what I mean? Like what version, what aspect of me is the issue? And do I really want to address that and work on that and face it? And so I think same thing with my therapist. I mean, I didn't wait the second session. This first session I went in there and I like started bawling like immediately. But you know, my therapist is also awesome. And it was very much having to address childhood wounds that I didn't want to either face or admit, and a lot of like family of origin stuff, because I always lived a life thinking that my family was perfect. And in reality, yes, they're amazing, but there's no such thing as a perfect family. Yeah. And so seeing that part, like I really had to do the work as well. But confronting the issue, because I was so scared that the issue really essentially is me, was a huge fear that made me really hesitant and didn't go into therapy until I was like in my late 20s, early 30s.
I love it. I mean, come on, hard language to who's fucking up my life? Me.
No, let's call denominator.
I mean, it's again, maybe it's the therapy I've done, but I'm telling you, once you actually accept it, it's not as scary. Own it. It's not as scary, and it's not as hard, because you know what's harder? Finding excuses. Yeah. You know what's more difficult? Trying to constantly weave this web that everyone else is doing this against you. I'm telling you, victim mindset leads to poverty mindset, which leads to not ever hitting your trajectory or your goals or your ambitions. So you have to focus in on that. It's you.
Right. And don't you just want to live like a healthier lifestyle? I mean, unless you have the perfect life and you have no relational conflict, no stress, no health issues, no any sort of emotional, dysregulation, then okay, don't go to therapy. That's fine.
But that's all a lie. You have one of those things.
Right. But I mean, we're just saying, and obviously we're biased because we are therapists, but just trust us. Like, we all had fears going in, and some people are not fearful at all, and they just jump right in. But we're speaking to the crowd that like is hesitant, which we absolutely agree. The cost is an issue for some, depending on which type of therapist you're looking for, and we totally understand that. But
I'll tell you, as working as a therapist, there was a time as an associate, I am doing therapy with others, and I couldn't afford therapy for myself. And it took work to find, like, yes, okay, this person fits within my sliding scale. Yeah. So it's a side of the industry. We have to find out a way to make it work. Definitely check out your insurance plans if you have a provider's. Kaiser helps more now. I mean, sure, it's
Mm-hmm.
going to take time. There are challenges and barriers, but I'm telling you, if you wanted it badly enough, you'll do it, right? Because
Oh, absolutely.
we all have
Self-care.
flat screens in our
Yeah,
in
we
our
all
house,
have
right?
cell phones for the
Yeah.
most part.
If you can drop $1,000 for a new iPhone XR, but
Yeah.
you can't afford therapy, come on.
Priorities,
Yeah, drop that in a bucket. That's not the truth.
And also speaking just to the therapist crowd, please invest in your own therapy. I mean, I think the best part of, I think the two main things about being a therapist, of becoming a better therapist, is to one, do your own work, do your own therapy, and also find community with other therapists.
Oh, absolutely. The third, and this is if you can afford to do it, this might just come from my own faith-based side, but whether you're spiritual or faith-based, whatever, try to find room in your practice to tithe something.
Yeah.
You know, when I was in private practice, I had 2 slots that I would accept sliding scale rates at, because that's what I could afford to do. And to be honest, I was seeing 7 people a week, so 2 was a pretty good spot for me. That's what I could give. And so as a therapist, you know, if we really
To give back.
to sit back and realize that we've all been in that spot too. I don't care if you're charging $80 a session, $250 a session. Maybe you find that spot where you can fit in someone for $40. I think that's a big thing of really, you want to be more than an empath. You want to really join these people where they're at.
Absolutely. And there's so many other fears that we haven't talked about that we can continue to talk about in later podcasts, or if you guys have certain fears that you want to process with us or have us like hash out, we'd be more than happy to. And then also thank you to BuzzFeed for providing this article that provided this podcast topic.
Yeah, BuzzFeed, whenever you guys want to sit down and do a video with us, we can do that.
We love BuzzFeed.
We can pencil you in. So again, thank you all. If you're listening, if you're driving, continue driving safe. If you're sitting at home taking time, we're glad that you tuned into us. Again, we will release another podcast in a week. Thank you for sharing this space and time with us. Remember, SessionWell.com. That's our website. SessionWell on Instagram and Facebook. We look forward to connecting with you.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.